Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Officer Ethan Griffin. 2023 hours. The 28th of March, 02. My partner, Bella, and I were on patrol when we got a call about a domestic disturbance in the area. Neighbors reported shouting and the sound of things breaking. We headed over, though, to be honest, these calls usually turn out to be nothing. People calm down once we show up, and there's not much to do. We can't arrest someone just for yelling at their spouse. Still, sometimes things can get out of hand, so we have to be careful. We reached the address, a typical suburban home, and as we got out of the car, we could hear the shouting. Bella glanced at me before darting to the front window. I've caught some teasing from the other officers about having a partner like her, but I'm often impressed by how useful her abilities are. Like now, she could easily peek through the window to get a sense of what was going on inside. The teasing was light-hearted. Officer Bella Faye is an invaluable member of the Sorcery Patrol. She might take the jokes personally sometimes, but I don't get involved. Our partnership is built on trust. We rely on each other's backs, and without that, it's not going to work. By the time I reached the door, Bella had already scouted the situation. She hovered by my side as we could still hear noise coming from inside. "How's it look, Em?" "Couldn't see much. They're in the kitchen." "Looks like a typical argument. No signs of weapons or anything." I knocked loudly and called out, "Police," and the noise inside stopped abruptly. After a tense silence, the door unlocked and opened. The man who greeted us seemed a bit exhausted but also relieved to see us. That was unusual for these types of calls. He invited us in. "Officer." He saw Bella and corrected himself, "Sorry, officers. I'm so glad you're here. You have to help me with my husband." "Husband?" Bella asked, raising an eyebrow. "Care to explain?" The man looked embarrassed. "The woman in the other room is my husband. I tried to punish him for cheating, so I got an idol to swap our bodies. But now he won't switch back." His voice cracked, and I could see tears in his eyes. I wish I could say this was the first time I'd heard something like this, but we'd dealt with body swap cases before. They hardly ever went as planned, especially when the exchanges weren't mutual. If we were going to solve this, we'd need to speak with both parties. "All right, we need to speak with your husband as well. Is he in the other room?" "He?" "What's with the he?" A woman appeared in the doorway, wearing a short red dress that seemed ill-fitting. She stood in a stance that could only be described as tough, one hand cupping her body's large left chest, the other gripping her crotch. "Does this look like a he to you?" she snapped. "Would you prefer to be addressed as she, I asked calmly. "Duh. That's what I am now, isn't it?" "Thanks to," she sneered with disgust. "Him." The man winced. "I'm not a him. This was supposed to be temporary, Gerald. This was meant to make you understand how I feel." "How you feel?" "Well, Carol," Gerald started, running his hand over her body, "if you felt like this, why the hell were you so cold? I wouldn't have cheated if you'd been more willing. Now that I know what it's like, I think you got the better deal." "Yeah, well, maybe I would've if you were any good at it. You'd come home from the bar barely able to stand, and then you want a quickie with your pathetic little equipment. Your equipment now, baby." All right, both of you, enough." I intervened as they began shouting again. "I want you both to sit down, right now. We're going to hear each of you out one at a time." "But You don't." "One at a time, now sit down, both of you, or we'll arrest both of you for disturbing the peace. Your neighbors are trying to sleep." After they were seated, we asked Carol to explain her side, making it clear to Gerald that there would be no interruptions. "Well, Jerry and I weren't doing well for a while, but I thought at least he was being honest about it. Then I find out he's been cheating on me. Not just once, he's been with at least a dozen different women over the past year. The jerk." Gerald started to protest, so we told Carol to hold off on the name-calling for the moment. She wiped a few tears with her large hands, trying not to break down again. She collected herself before continuing. Anyway, I decided to teach him a lesson about how I felt. I went to a spell shop and bought a body-swapping idol. I thought if he spent a few days in my body, he'd understand how I felt. That was 2 weeks ago, and now I find out he's been cheating again, this time with men. For all I know, he's gotten my body pregnant or infected with something, and he won't switch back. And Carol's voice cracked as she began to tear up again, and now I'm stuck like this. She broke into sobs, her baritone cries sounding a little strange. I glanced at Gerald to see how he'd respond, but he just rolled his eyes at his wife's tears and absent-mindedly toyed with his clothing. Anything to add? No, not really. She pretty much nailed it. Last I checked, sleeping around isn't actually a crime. Plus, the body swap was her idea in the first place. I didn't do anything, and just because it backfired on her, suddenly I'm the bad guy? Serves her right. I'm having fun, and I'm not changing back until I'm good and ready. Bella finished writing and then asked, so, just to be clear, you're not pressing charges against your wife? Press charges? So they can make us switch back? Hell no, I'm winning right now. The tough part was, he had a point. Technically, he hadn't broken any laws. He was a jerk, sure, but there wasn't anything illegal about it. The wife, however, had committed the only crime when she initiated the non-consensual body swap. It didn't seem like Gerald would press charges over that, so our hands were tied unless we wanted to arrest both of them for disturbing the peace. All right, I think I get it, I said. Carol, you've got a problem here because the body swap was illegal. You could face charges for that. But as it stands, possession is 9/10 of the law, and Gerald's refusal to switch back isn't theft. Also, adultery isn't a crime. Gerald smiled smugly, but then Bella spoke up. What adultery can lead to is divorce. As an officer of the law, I can't offer legal advice, but I've known someone in a similar situation. She got a good lawyer, sued for her original body back, and won along with most of her ex-husband's money. Carol's tear-streaked face brightened, and she smiled widely. My cousin's a divorce attorney, and she's always hated Gerald. You remember Edie, right, Gerald? They call her the castrator. By now, Gerald wasn't looking so smug anymore. He stood up quickly, nearly toppling over in the high heels, still moving like a truck driver despite the body swap. He stormed over to Bella, poking his finger in her direction. Why don't you mind your own business, Tinkerbell? I tensed, anticipating the confrontation, but Bella kept her cool. Her voice was cold, calm, she was holding back her anger. Sir, I'm doing my job as an officer and informing the victim of her options. If you have an issue with that, you're welcome to file a complaint with the Sorcery Police Department. Otherwise, I'll need you to stop interfering with my duties. Oh, yeah? What are you gonna do if I don't, huh? Pint size. Bella didn't answer, just set her jaw and narrowed her eyes. I was a little worried too, but I knew she'd handle it on her own. Nothing, huh? Some cop you are, honey. What a pushover. Gerald jabbed a finger at her, and then his expression twisted in pain as his wife suddenly slumped to the floor. Good for you, Bella, you waited for him to make the first move. I couldn't help but smile at her. Bella flew over to Carol, holding up a small stun wand. No lasting damage, I assure you, Bella said with a grin, but it hurts like hell. Carol smiled back, clearly relieved. Bella took Carol's final statement while I carried Gerald, still in his wife's body, out to the patrol car. When he woke up, he'd be charged with assaulting a police officer, but considering the ongoing divorce, the DA would likely drop the charges. I couldn't help but smile at how this had turned out. Domestic disputes are usually tricky. We often deal with victims too afraid to press charges, and even though we have some discretion, it's always a grey area. But here, I felt like we had actually helped someone, and that felt good. Bella flew through the car window and settled into her seat. We exchanged a nod before heading off to the station.